I grew up in a fairly large city during the 70s. At that time communications were quite precarious. The only thing we had was the postal service, the traditional telephone and the telegram. Our entertainment came from radio and television, and the way to hear about important events was through the printed newspaper. Nowadays, things have changed a lot, and I notice it with my grandchildren. They spend most of the day on different electronic devices. At their young age, they handle them in a way I don't understand. And they're connected to everyone and everything just a click away. They can learn from everything, but unfortunately, they don't do it. I don't want this to seem like a story of an old-fashioned old man who is against the new generations. But I'm very concerned about the way children are so far removed from reality that they even ignore things that could save their lives. They want to receive the information summarized and explained by people who are far from professionals in the subject they deal with, so they are easy prey to bad people or interests. Why do I tell my story? Well, it's simple. When I was just 12 years old, something strange happened to all of us who lived in the neighborhood. The place was alike many in the city, but with the particularity that, instead of being an apartment, all the livings were houses that didn't share a wall, a project for the new middle-class families. There were 6 families living in the neighborhood, all of us with at least 2 children and enough income to say that we were not poor, so we could afford a television without a problem. At that time, there was a very popular program, called The Grand Prize of $65,000, and after its success, it was replicated in several versions. The program was about answering questions about general culture, and as a closure, a question that was worth the title. $65,000 was a very good money for that time. All the families wanted to participate. It is important to re-emphasize that the time was different. All the information shown to citizens was controlled or manipulated by the government. The story I tell is about the Ocampo family, a very beloved family in the neighborhood. They were the last to move in and unfortunately, the first to leave. It was a family with a hard-working father and a mother dedicated to the children, Anna, Martin and Ramses. Even today I can't forget how it was the last time we saw each other in the garden of the neighborhood. One afternoon, the mother, Regina, received a call from a supposed major television station in the country. They were looking for her husband Fernando since they had very important news for him and for the whole family. But they needed them to be all together to hear the news. They agreed that at 6 p.m. was the perfect time. 2 days passed and the call didn't arrive, until the 3rd day. The father replied eagerly to be informed that he had been selected to participate in the most watched program in the country. However, the call was from another program, with more and better prizes. This one combined general knowledge with singing, dancing and other skills. It would be recorded on one of the best beaches in the country, with all expenses paid. They were told that they had to wait for a car on the avenue, in the early morning, and that had a government logo. This car would take them and return them 1 week later. They asked them not to carry documentation since they already had it. My mother listened so excitedly to Regina that I didn't want to discourage her by telling her that those conditions were very strange. I didn't want her to see me as someone jealous. The afternoon before the family set out on the journey, Anna, the eldest of the siblings and my best friend, promised us that she would bring many shells to decorate all the houses, and that she would bring a bathrobe as a souvenir of what would be the best vacation of her life. I never imagined that would be the last time I would see her. Everyone already knew what Ocampo's family were going for, so they didn't wake up at dawn to see them leave, and the Ocampos didn't want to wake anyone up. They, trying to give their relatives a surprise, gave them different versions so that they would be surprised to see them on national television. If only we had had at our disposal the information we have today, that family wouldn't have disappeared from the face of the earth. At dawn, we waited for news of them, but we didn't hear anything. We thought maybe they were very tired, or they were being given a tour. The second day passed and nothing. On the third day we were starting to worry. Neighbors told Marissa, one of Regina's neighbors and best friend, to dial the hotel, as she knew which hotel they would stay in. Everyone thought that maybe they were focused on the program. But Marissa's hunches told her that something was wrong, and during the fourth day she decided to make the call to the hotel to check. The response of the young man at the reception was that there was no one with that name, nor with that of the husband, and that, in fact, they don't have any reservation during that week for a family of 5. That led Marissa to tell my parents and the other neighbors everything she knew. From the strange rules to the supposed government sponsorships. That night she and several of the neighbors entered the Ocampos house, with the intention of finding something that would tell them where to locate them. A letter, maybe a card with information, but there was nothing. There were only the family's things. Clothes, bags. They had even been so careless to leave a good amount of money in sight. It was as if they had run out of that place. Toothbrushes thrown in the middle of the kitchen, glasses of decomposed milk, poorly put bath towels, weird things for someone with cleaning habits like Regina's. By the 5th day without news from the Ocampos, we were all worried. The adults tried to keep the subject private. But somehow us, the little ones, began to listen one thing or another. Already at my age I could understand what was going on. But in my mind as a child there was no possibility that something bad was happening. The adults began talking to the Ocampos relatives in search of some information. But upon learning that they had even less information than we did, they decided to tell them what we knew. The annoyance of Fernando's brother was big. He looked to the authorities in hope of information. He went to all the instances, but they all told him the same thing. Nobody knew absolutely nothing. The supposed program didn't exist. No one on the television station knew about such a project. That was how several days later he began an investigation into the disappearance of the Ocampo family. I remember they interrogated all the families, including us, the children. They wanted to know anything they had told us, but the reality is that we only knew what we had heard from adults. The hotel they would be staying at gave everything they needed to prove that they never got to the place. An attempt was made to find out what phone number was used for the calls. And even an operative was initiated to look for the vans that picked them up in the early morning, but everything was being in vain. But until that day the police had no background with that modus operandi. It was the first disappearance of that style. Police dogs smelled the family's clothes and began to search all over the city. Helicopters flew over the area looking for suspicious movements, but everything seemed in vain, until one night Fernando's brother received a call. The only thing he heard from the other side was the voice of his brother crying and asking to stop looking for him, that the children and his wife were fine but that they stopped looking for them. At that moment the call was cut off. The investigation continued, since kidnapping is something that is pursued ex officio. As time went on, they received more and more calls. But this time from strangers directly threatening him and his family. On the part of the neighbors, the search continued. Every day Marissa spoke to the radio stations asking that the news of the disappearance of the Ocampos be made public, but as soon as she named them, they cut off the call and didn't put it on the air. At one point, everyone cooperated to pay for an ad in one of the largest circulation newspapers in the country. But they only charged and never published it. Everyone in the neighborhood understood that the issue had already taken on a different tint when strangers came to the house to take out all the family's belongings. Furniture, clothes, appliances. Everything. They claimed to have a seizure order from the bank. They wanted us to believe that they owed a lot of money to the bank. The same happened with the electricity and water companies and even with the government. Everyone began to create stories of debts and scams on Fernando's part. Even in his work they accused him of having provoked a fraud of several millions of dollars. But all of us who really knew him, we knew that it was not true. The disappearance of the Ocampo family was carped, and the version that was disseminated as official was that the father of the family had fled before he was caught. That he had faked a kidnapping and possibly his death with the intention of deceiving justice. I know that this is not a scary story and much less will instill fear in the new generations. But I do it because less than a year ago I returned to the now deteriorated neighborhood, which by the way has already changed its name. I met a woman sitting at the entrance with her feet and hands completely dirty. Her skin had visible infection marks and her hair tangled and with a very strong smell of dirt. She was wearing clothes that looked like they were coming out of the trash, and when she saw me, she took off something that looked like a coat. I ignored this and walked into what was my home and inevitably began to have endless memories. I was there to get the last things out of the house because since the death of my parents, my brother and I had decided to sell it. Just as I left, I turned to see the Ocampos house, and I thought something. There was something in the gaze of that homeless lady that made me inevitably remember my friend Anna. I don't know if it was her deep honey-colored eyes or her beautiful little nose. When I returned to the entrance, she was gone, and the only thing I found on the floor was that dirty and deteriorated coat, although it was not really a coat. It was a bathrobe of that extinct hotel in which she was going to spend the best vacation of her life.